everyone. Welcome to the Zone to Speak podcast. I'm your host, Juliana. Before the episode, I have got to share one of my absolute favorite ride essentials, the Cyc Plus Smart Pump. This little thing goes everywhere with me. It's compact, powerful, and honestly a game changer on the bike. I love using it mid-ride when switching between terrains. I can drop the pressure for gravel and then pump it back up when I hit the road. Super easy, super fast. And of course, it's a total lifesaver in case of a flat or any loss of air. No stress, no hand pumping. Just press the button and go. You can grab yours with 10% off using my code ZONE2SPEAK. Link and details are in the episode notes. Trust me, once you try it, you won't leave for a ride without it. Cyc Plus Smart Pump. Smart, simple, and ready for any adventure. Now, let's hear it for the episode. All right. Today on Zone to Speak, we are stepping slightly off the bike and into the stories that shape the sport. My guest is Sjors Beukeboom, a journalist, filmmaker, and the founder and editor-in-chief of Nafent Magazine, a publication that has become deeply rooted in the cycling culture, especially in Catalonia. Beyond that, Sjors has worked inside the pro peloton, creating content and telling stories from within teams like Movistar, giving him a rare perspective on both sides of the sport, the athlete experience, and the narrative that reaches the outside world. Today, we will talk about how he found his way into cycling storytelling, what's like to work inside the pro peloton, the creation of Nafent Magazine, and how media shapes the way we understand endurance, suffering, and the beauty on the bike. Let's get into it. Welcome to Zone to Speak.
Thank you very much. That's a beautiful introduction. I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Well, I've been trying to get you on the pod for a while since I moved to Girona. Our paths crossed online and offline because I saw the magazine and I love what you created. But let's go to the beginning. What came first for you, cycling itself or the desire to document and tell stories about it?
Ooh, that's a good question. Then we have to go pretty far back, even though I only just turned 30. I think the desire for storytelling was there first because I started with a semi-national newspaper when I was 12 or 13 years old.
Wow.
Writing a weekly interview with an athlete from the north of the Netherlands. Could be any sport, so not necessarily cycling related, even though I interviewed also cyclists, but also swimmers, football players, tennis players, horse riding, anything basically. So that passion for storytelling, I think, has been there for longer than my passion for cycling, because ultimately I only got into cycling when I was around 15 or 16 years old. And when I started to combine both together, I think it was the best of both worlds.
Cool. Very interesting. It must feel so good. Like you had this passion and then you got into cycling and then you were inside, the peloton. What is it about cycling specifically that makes it such a powerful subject for storytelling?
Well, I think, first of all, storytelling is very much connected with cycling more than with other sports, I would say. If you look at, for instance, the storylines that we have from the 1930s or the 1940s, for instance, now in Italy for the Settimani, Coppi, Bartali. And if we're talking about two legendary figures with great storytelling, I think it is both Coppi and Bartali. So I think it's actually an excellent example in that sense.
That's true.
I think it's very much connected with each other. And if I look at other sports, sure, at the Olympic Games, for instance, there's always good stories to share, to tell. But then in cycling, I feel like the storytelling is even much more part of the sport. And I think that is also one of the parts of the sport that I like and enjoy most, and to be part of it with particularly Nafent Magazine, which is now my full-time job, but also still doing some days as a freelancer for several teams. I think it's a great combination of both, and I'm enjoying very much to tell those stories from both inside the peloton and inside the teams, as well as following other riders basically for Nafent Magazine.
And what it is like working inside the pro team, and any favorite races, any of the classics, anything that you love the most, look forward to?
So 5 years ago, I got the chance to work with a World Tour team. That was back then a Pro Continental team that turned into a World Tour team, which is now the NSN team. And back then, those big races, they were fascinating to me. And particularly a Tour de France, for instance, was something, an event that I really wanted to do in my life. However, after 5 years to where I'm at now, which now I'm in a very small town here, just outside of Milan, I believe, for a smaller race, while the Volta Catalunya is happening in Catalonia, where you and I live. And then on the other hand, now I'm in Italy for the Settimana Coppi Bartali. I must admit that those smaller races are actually the ones that I enjoy much more. And it was
Really?
a deliberate decision to then actually take a step back from that World Tour cycling and head into a third tier team, which is Team Ucchio that I'm currently working for. Because these smaller races, they still have something adventurous, if that makes sense. You always need to be vigilant. You need to adapt to the circumstances. There is a certain level of coincidence in cycling and the work behind it that you don't really feel anymore in the World Tour. There's this luxurious bus. There's enough cars for everyone. You always you always get where you want to be, and also. And then instead, with a smaller team like Team Ucchio that I'm working for now, 40 days a year approximately, it is still much more an adventure. Basically, you're out here with your teammates, which you can consider somewhat family, and yeah, it's a whole different kind of vibe, really.
Yeah, yeah. Now that you explain, I can see like a different type of magic. I think maybe being on these big races, it is dream come true. It is a check on the box, but yeah, those smaller races, they're still very roots, I guess, and then you get to see so
Mm.
much more. Um, is there any part of the sport that fans don't usually see that you get to see?
I think so. Particularly in the bigger races, the cameras are at a lot of places already, from start to finish, and even after the finish, whether that's the podium ceremony or rider interviews afterwards. What I think is where the magic really happens in a World Tour team is also the team bus, which is a place that is very hard to reach for the average cycling fan. You don't often get a chance to be in the bus, especially not
Yeah,
when the riders are there, because that's also basically their only and their last moment of peace
space.
before they get into the race. Um, However, then with a smaller team like Ucchio, we don't have a team bus, so we're working with a camper, which is around, I would say, 4 or 5 times smaller. And also, the camper is a place where the cameras don't get too much. However, in terms of my role, this is actually much more fun also with a smaller team, since I have the chance to be anywhere and everywhere. While big teams and World Tour teams would particularly, for instance, really claim that privacy of the riders in the bus, I can move around freely everywhere, and there's a lot more freedom in smaller teams, not only with the colleagues and the riders, and they're also much more open to media and to social media content creation, but also, for instance, in terms of the organization of races. If I go to a Tour de France or a Giro d'Italia, there is fewer possibilities for the digital storytelling, since there's a lot of regulations. The broadcasting rights have been sold to the big media globally. Here in the Settimani Coppi Bartali, small organization, anything is allowed. I can film, make photos in the race, whether that is from the course or from the car, anything is allowed, which makes the work also much more challenging and much more fun ultimately.
Yeah, like more relaxed guidelines and more, that means more creativity for you.
Absolutely, yeah, and that is ultimately the main reason why I enjoy My job with a cycling team is to be creative, to find different perspectives on a race, on a rider, and to indeed, like you said in your introduction, to do that storytelling, which is my passion ultimately.
Yeah. Let's talk about Nafente. So,
Hmm.
Nafente isn't just media, right? It's become part of the cycling culture, especially in Girona, all over Catalonia, connecting riders, places, stories across the region. What was the original idea behind it, and what kind of stories did you feel were missing from cycling that birthed with Nafente?
So Nafent Cycling Magazine is the first ever cycling magazine in Catalan. So that is the main, I would say, the most special part of the magazine, of the project. Then,
Mhm.
in addition, it is bilingual, so it's not only Catalan, but it is also in English. And in that way, the Catalan cyclist and the Catalan cycling community is being served with, for the first time in the history of the Catalan territories, a magazine about cycling in their language, while also the people visiting, whether that is for short periods of time as a tourist or longer period of time as an expat. You also can learn about the country and the places that you're visiting in English. And ultimately, what was the main reason behind all of this is to connect the Catalan cycling community with the international cycling community, which in Girona, for instance, are two massive groups. A lot of people ride their bikes, but I also saw from the very beginning that these two communities are very separated. So the international cyclists, they tend to go out with their international cycling friends, while the Catalan cyclists are really basically only riding their bikes and doing group rides with other Catalan cyclists. And that is something I struggled with 5 years ago when I started Nafent. And the goal ultimately for Nafent is to connect these two communities. That's why we have the magazine in two languages. We publish 4 times per year. We're in more than 300 places across Catalan-speaking territories, which is a huge number: bike shops, cafeterias, cycling hotspots. And also since last year, we're organizing actively social events, which can be community rides or even community runs, in order to connect these two communities in a better way. That is the philosophy behind the project.
I love it. I think it's needed. I think you're absolutely right. From living in Girona, sometimes, even though it's a capital of cycling, I want to say in Spain or Europe even, but sometimes it can be hard to find community because of the separation, and also because a lot of people travel a lot because they are racing all over. So having this as something to unite people, it's really, really helpful. Yeah, you're doing a great job. And speaking of which, you are also based in Girona. What brought you there? Was it because it was kind of the global meeting point for cyclists, or work brought you there?
No, from the so work ultimately made me move to Girona. I
Okay.
had been visiting for many times before with my dad in particular,
Hmm,
who's an active cyclist himself. We
cool.
went quite regularly, I would say once every 1 2 years, to Girona over a period of 6 7 years before I actually moved to Girona myself. That was back then purely for work, which was with what is now called the NSN team. I worked 3 years with them as a communications manager, I would say. And the reason why I'm staying is on one hand because of the Nafent project nowadays, which has grown, as you said, quite significantly, up to the point that I can uh, proudly say that it has become my full-time job, together with some of my colleagues and the strong team that I have behind me. And the other reason why I'm staying in Girona is the climate, which for me is a huge factor as well. Coming from the Netherlands originally, with its horrendous winters, lots of wind, lots of rain, fog. That is something I definitely do not miss from my home country, and that makes me stay in Girona for what is now 6 years already.
Wow. Wow. Nice. Yeah. It's a really special place. It's a really special place. Yeah. I came down to Seville for a little bit for personal reasons. And it is a wonderful city, but once you cycle in Girona, it's really tough going other places. I mean, there are many beautiful places in the world, but Girona is just so nice that in 5-10 minutes out of your doorstep, you are in rural areas and with beautiful, beautiful views. Doesn't matter what direction you go.
Very much. I think it's a very diverse landscape. Then
Yeah.
I think Girona's popularity also has come a lot with the rise of social media, especially
Yeah.
from athletes like Robert Gessing, who had been publishing a lot on Instagram and on Strava with beautiful photos, given his passion for photography.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't necessarily believe that Girona is like exceptional. Like there's a lot of beautiful towns in the area, also close by. But then I think there's been a lot of factors as well as a little bit of coincidence that ultimately made Girona as famous for cycling as it is today. And people call it the European cycling capital, which I think is very appropriate looking at road cycling and also particularly gravel cycling
Yeah.
nowadays,
Have it
which
all.
for gravel cycling is also phenomenal. However, I do believe that, for instance, for gravel cycling, the area Alt Emporda, which is, let's say, it starts 25 kilometers north from Girona, I think that is even more beautiful than Girona surroundings for gravel cycling in particular. So no, it has a lot. It is fantastic, and the cycling communities, as we talked about before, are very active. A lot of people love the sport there. There's a lot of respect for the cyclists,
Yeah.
and also on the road, which is super important. Um, and hopefully with Nafent, with the project, we're able to connect even more the Catalan cyclists with the international community that is nowadays also very large, particularly in Girona.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I need to get some of the routes you have from Importa. And
I'm happy to share.
I wanted to ask you, how can listeners get a hold of Nafent Magazine? Is there an online subscription for people that are not in the area? And people that are in the area, how can they get the magazine?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are available in over 300 places across Catalan-speaking territories, but not
Great.
necessarily for sale. If people would like to purchase, for instance, a subscription, which means 4 editions in 2026, or even a single copy, I would love to redirect them to the web shop. So that is nafentmagazine.com slash shop. And that is where the people can indeed buy a subscription. We ship internationally, and also we ship internationally, and also, of course, in the whole of Spain, to Andorra as well. So anywhere you live, we can get you the copies of Nafent magazine. The next edition of our magazine, which is already volume 18, that one will be out by the end of May approximately.
Nice. I saw a friend of mine in the magazine. I was so proud and happy to see her there, Sarah Harris.
I Yeah, of
Yes.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. She started
yeah,
a women triathlon camp in
yeah,
Catalonia.
yeah. Yeah, fantastic place as well, all the way in the
Yeah.
south, in
Yeah.
the Delta de l'Ebre, which is also phenomenal for gravel cycling,
Mhm.
like a lot of places in Catalonia. But no, for sure, Sarah is I think doing a lot of activities there, and yeah, fantastic woman, really.
Yeah. So, yeah, another great story that you brought to life. I was happy to see. So, cycling media often captures beautiful landscapes, perfect light, epic moments, but the lived experience can be messy, uncomfortable, and far from perfect. How do you balance showing the beauty of cycling without losing the reality of how hard it actually is?
I think from a staff point of view, um, a race, for instance, like Paris-Nice or the Dauphiné, the Critérium du Dauphiné, are some of the hardest races.
Mm,
Long transfers, horrible hotels
wow.
that really drain your motivation and your happiness around the work. Reason for me to not wanting to continue doing the work in bigger and World Tour teams for the time being, at least. And in terms of the riders, I mean, it's a very tough sport. It's a very tough sport in the sense of everything is also getting faster and more difficult, and rides are getting stronger, and the difference
Yeah.
in level between the top riders and the riders really trying to make a living out of their sport is getting bigger and bigger. You have to be more professional. You have to invest more time, more efforts, and you have to sacrifice more. And I think these all come with I would say interesting perspectives in terms of storytelling on the sport. And at the finish, for instance, when the riders come across the line, the faces speak for themselves. Really, like they suffer big time
Yeah.
and all the time. And these kinds of photos and videos that I am taking then at the finish line, yeah, they are. I find them still quite impactful. For instance, Tour of Sardinia last month, I think it was the end of February. We had one of my riders from the Japanese team, Team Ukyo, who came across the line, and he won the race out of the breakaway. And he had worked
Wow.
very hard to get that victory. And even though it was, I would say, just the Giro di Sardinia, it's a third or fourth level race, which is, it's not the Tour de France. It's also not a classic. It's not Paris-Nice or anything else. It's also not the Volta a Catalunya, but the Giro di Sardinia. But he was super emotional. Like, he came across the line, he bursted into tears.
Oh.
He had come from far. He had several injuries so that storyline, it was an easy one to make, especially if you see someone so emotional. So it was a beautiful day of work. It was also a very easy day at work, so to say, because he made it me
Yeah.
so easy by being so
Yeah.
emotional. But at every finish line, whether you win or whether you lose, there's always good stories to tell, I would say. And it is the cycling sport is heroic as well, which makes everything quite impactful in terms of digital storytelling, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense. You are a writer yourself. How does behind the camera change the way you understand suffering and performance compared to being on the bike yourself?
Yeah, I think the difference is quite significant, since if you measure yourself against your competition, it is surely much harder than when you're going out for bike ride just yourself.
Yeah.
So in my case, as long as I have some free time in Girona, I like to go out for bike rides and challenge myself. But then ultimately, I would never feel as challenged as when I would be in a peloton, for instance, and racing for well, maybe the victory. Like, I've done a few races myself, never on high level, but I do know. I like to believe that I know a little bit what these guys are going through, and I think it's also, I would say, important to have that experience, not necessarily in cycling, but to have experience in competitive sports. I think that is quite important to understand and realize how significant it can be to have a good result in a race that is of your level or maybe a little bit higher. And um, yeah, to have that experience personally, I think it does help the storytelling that I'm doing with the teams and the riders on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you do this sport and you understand, it's easier to get a little bit inside their head. Yeah.
Hmm.
And you were talking also about before how the sport is getting faster and faster, and I think there is also a lot of different of opinions there. The way cycling is portrayed influences how people understand the sport. Do you feel a responsibility in how you tell stories about cycling, and what do you try to show, and what do you choose not to show?
I think I always try to be as transparent as possible. in what I'm doing, because I truly believe that showing the riders and the team and the race behind the scenes is what interests people and
Hmm.
followers and fans the most. So I think that should always be the main priority in terms of digital storytelling. And I also always try to focus on an actual story. So I think proper storylines are still interesting enough for what is now a very fast digital world in which people consume news or content in ridiculously fast ways. But then I
Yeah.
think when you have a proper storyline and you can drag the people into it and make them interested in what you're writing or the photos that you take or the videos that you make, then I think there's still a space for this. And I think that that's my personal opinion. It should always be the priority, the storytelling, and maybe there is some teams in the majority of the teams, especially on World Tour level, they are, I would say, not focusing on it too much, but they rather make that fast content that basically just shows that just shows some images rather than the explanation of actually what is happening in those images, if that makes sense. And that is,
Yeah.
maybe that's my journalistic approach since I studied audiovisual journalism. I'm always looking for that storyline behind the video, and it's also what I
Hmm.
enjoy most. But I also think there's the space for it on digital platforms to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you said that, because that's going to be my next question. Because sometimes I see things online and I want to know more, and you cannot find anything about it. And I get it, like the way we consume stories is changing. It's faster content, like you said, shorter attention spans, more platforms. I feel the need for print. I love some realness, I love to touch and feel, sometimes even hold, on your coffee table. Um, where do you see cycling storytelling going in the next few years?
Well, I hope in a way in which proper storytelling is still allowed and still perceived well by the fans. Though obviously over the last few years, I don't, I it has gotten worse in terms of attention span, click rates, how fast people scroll on from a video. You can spend
Yeah.
hours on a great edit and a great story, and if the algorithm is against you for whatever reason and no one knows why, then just a
Yeah.
few people will actually see it, and of those few people, maybe 5 of them are watching the video for more than 10 seconds, which is exceptionally frustrating if you spend a lot of hours into it and you look into the data and the
Absolutely.
statistics of your publication afterwards. You might recognize it yourself with running a podcast like So to Speak,
Yeah.
in which you do that publication. You're super happy with how the interview went. You spent a lot of hours in investigation and preparation
Yeah.
and editing
Yeah.
afterwards, and ultimately there's just very little results from it in terms of the numbers on social media platforms. I hope that changes, and I do really believe that there will be a point, and hopefully we've already reached it, in which people realize that proper storytelling is interesting, and that people will consciously take the decision to perceive that information in a nice way. So I hope that also in terms of print, people will continue to appreciate a product that you can actually have in your hands rather than always being on your phone. So in that sense, I would also say Nafent, as the platform that we are and the printed magazine that we are, is also um, a little bit activistic, if that's a good English word for it, to
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
try to keep a printed magazine in our society and the cycling community.
Yeah. No, I love that this exists. So thanks for bringing Nafenta to life. I mean, of course, I use social media. I like social media, but I personally feel the need to pick up a magazine and read real stories. Like background context and also read a book. I'm still enjoy that. I don't want to just get news or story just online. For me, that's important, and I hope others see value in that and continue to invest in that, subscribing to real media news and support that, because otherwise it will go away. Hopefully not. Yeah, I think that that's super important, and I hope I do feel like I don't know, just talking to a few people, I do feel that a lot of people are taking step backs, wanting a little bit more of quote unquote the old fashioned way,
Yeah.
because it's just too much,
Yeah.
screens. And I also work in front of a computer most of the day. I don't want to finish my day and go back to a screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And also, I like to believe that I've read studies a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago, in which the upward trend of people using social media is actually now stagnating and slightly decreasing. So people are
Yeah.
now hopefully realizing that they spend so many hours, whether that is the younger generations or even the older generations, that they spend so many hours on their screens, on their phones, on platforms like Instagram and TikTok, which are highly addictive. And hopefully that trend keeps keeps going, and that hours spent on those platforms is ultimately decreasing significantly. Because personally, I'm not a big fan of these channels, and
Yeah.
um, I think they're utmost dangerous, basically for our society, and hopefully then also printed magazines, books, and other products that can actually get you somewhere and give proper journalism or proper storytelling, that they will gain popularity then again as well.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And also with those type of social platforms with AI now, you don't even know what's real, what's
That's
not
the
real.
worst.
Is this
That's the
real? Is
worst.
this fake?
Oof. Yeah,
So,
yeah, no,
yeah.
totally agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, no, that's
And the algorithm is a turn
yeah,
off for me as well, because sometimes I'm like, I want to see something, some pictures of my friends, and they are not even coming up anymore
yeah,
because I don't know, something that I'm talking at work comes up,
yeah,
and then my phone is listening, and I start to get, I don't know, something that has nothing to do with me. But yeah, it's getting tired. I mean, I enjoy certain things, but you really need to know how to use it and filter to your advantage. But it's just so good to have magazines like Nafent and you doing such a great job bringing very real and cool stories to life. I have to say I was a little bit nervous to interview a journalist. Hopefully I did a good job.
no, that was brilliant. Don't worry, I really enjoyed it, and no, I think the questions were very very interesting. They made me think actually about my work and about the project, and also working for teams in a way that I don't generally think about it. So in that sense, it was no, it was I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel better. And I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. Thanks for bringing us into your world and behind the race. And hopefully, I'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to the final result.
And that's all for today's episode. I want to thank the listeners for tuning in. Your support means everything. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends.